want to know how are your energy levels. Are you feeling really energized? Or are you feeling a bit flat or fatigued? If you want to build more energy, well, today's podcast is for you. I'm joined by my good friend, Dr Amantha Imber. She's an organisational psychologist and the founder of Inventium. And today on the show, we're talking about her latest book, The Energy Game. And this episode is so timely. She talks about the energy crisis where people are more exhausted than ever and they need the practical tools to rebuild their energy. And this conversation, we've separated into part 1 and part 2. The first part is all about the problem with energy right now, why we're so tired and what we can do about it. Part 2 is all about how you rebuild your energy using practical small challenges that you can implement straight away. And okay, this is jam-packed with practical tools. You are going to love it. Let's go. This is a podcast about making work work. You'll learn about leadership, career growth, and how to navigate those weird work challenges. I run a HR consulting business called Boldside, where I help leaders build epic team cultures. If you lead a team or run a business and you think I can help, let's connect on LinkedIn. My name is Shelley Johnson, and this is Work. So one thing I quickly learnt about you, and a common trait we share, is we're both anti-small talk. So we're going to dive straight in. And you've just released your new book, The Energy Game. So we're going to talk about that today. But one of the key parts that really surprised me in your story was you talk about fantasizing about being hospitalized. Can you unpack that for us?
I think about 2024 as my year of burnout, and it really came to a head in the middle of the year. It was June 2024, and I was walking with a friend of mine who happens to be a clinical psychologist, which I think is a really handy trait in a friend, and her name's Sabina, and we went for a walk, and I said to her, I've been having this really crazy kind of thought going around in my head, and can I share it with you? And I always hesitate to use the word crazy as a psychologist. I don't think that is in our code of ethics to talk about being crazy thoughts. Anyway, I said to her, I am having this fantasy that I wish I would get really, really sick, and it would be sick enough to send me to hospital for about a week. And I'd go to hospital and nobody could contact me. I would have none of my devices with me. People would send me sympathy cards, and there would be flowers, and there would be peace, and people would cook my beautiful hospital meals. And like literally the hardest thing I would have to do is decide, do I want lime jelly or do I want raspberry jelly? And then after a week, I would just emerge out of hospital completely recovered and rested, and on I would go with my life. And I said to Sabina, am I just going out of my mind? And she said, I have heard variations of that story so many times in my private practice that I have a name for it. I call it the getting hit by a bus or a car fantasy. And when she told me that, I remember feeling firstly relieved that I wasn't alone, but then also at the same time quite horrified that there were other people that were having this same really awful experience that I was having, where essentially I'd burnt out.
So what did you, like when you think about, okay, I'm fantasizing about going to hospital so I can rest, what was going on for you that made that feel like this is the only option?
So it had been a really hard year with Inventium. So I run a company called Inventium. We run a lot of corporate training programs around productivity, well-being, innovation, and a lot around AI as well. And I hadn't run the business for many years. I'd had a CEO, and that CEO had left at the end of 2023, and I had made the decision to find a new CEO. And while I was trying to find that person, I just jumped back into that role. And I didn't feel like I had a choice. So I don't want to say it was a bad decision, but that decision just nearly killed me. I was walking into a culture that was that was a hard one to walk back into. I was leading people that I don't think wanted me as their leader, which made it incredibly lonely. And at that point in time, in sort of 2023 and 2024, it was a pretty hard time for professional services business and certainly corporate training businesses. A lot of budgets were being cut. And so sales, like we were having to work 3 times as hard to get a fraction of the sales that we were used to and that I had to get in order to pay the operating expenses and people's salaries. So a lot of it was really about work stress.
And so it's really interesting to me when you look back and in hindsight we see, oh, wow, there were like all these early warning signs that I ignored or missed. What were some of the early warning signs as you look back now and you're like, gee, I should have noticed that sooner? What are some of those for you, Amantha?
There were definitely physical warning signs. So I am someone that has done strength training for many years, 4 times a week. Got a pretty strict routine. And I remember in 2024, like I'm used to being able to push myself harder and get new personal bests. And in 2024, I, like almost every workout, I'd be like, I don't really feel like I can push myself today. I'll just go a bit easy on myself. And I kept saying that and thinking, next week I'll be fine. Next week I'll be back to really pushing myself hard, until like next week becomes 6 months down the track and I've gone significantly backwards in my routine, which might sound kind of trivial. And at the time I didn't think too much of it. But like when you've been doing that for several months on end, I'm like, what is going on in my body that I can no longer push it? I'm just physically so depleted. Mentally, things were also not great. Part of my morning routine is that I'll do an hour or 2 of deep work and I'll make really significant progress on the things that matter most to me, the things that are driving, you know, the business forward, my own goals forward. And I found that those mornings just became distraction central. Like I was looking for that dopamine hit by checking my email 50 times before 10 a.m. and I was just letting other people's priorities become my own. And having written books on productivity, and that's a large part of what we do at Inventium, helping people be more productive, like I felt like the plumber with the blocked pipes. Like I felt like such a hypocrite and I felt so much shame. I'm like, why isn't my brain working properly? Why am I just giving into all these digital distractions that I tell our clients, no, stop it, don't do that. That's not how we work. So that was the mental side of things. And then emotionally, I would like to think I'm someone that's quite resilient. And I think as a business owner, as you know, like you've got to be bloody resilient to run a business for any period of time. But I found myself just like crying at the drop of a hat. There were so many meetings that I had with team members where, you know, there'd be tension, there'd be disagreements, and I would leave the meeting from the comfort of my home office because we're a remote first team, and I just burst into tears. And it got to the point where just crying at my desk became a daily activity. And it all kind of creeps up on you slowly until you suddenly stop and go, this isn't how life should be.
So there's so many things that I want to draw on what you've just said, and I'm trying to work out where's the best place to go. Can I just this is pure curiosity because it surprised me hearing you say that of the 3 categories, the physical, so you noticed in your body not being able to push yourself at the gym. Then the second one of the mental like side of it of looking for the dopamine hits, and then the third one around the emotional side of just crying at the drop of a hat. Would you normally say you're a crier? Like, do you cry easily?
No, I don't.
Because I'm really surprised because to me, I'm like, I wouldn't have pegged you as a crier. Like,
I'm not.
So just thinking about these little signs and some of the bigger ones, and then I want to draw on this one really important thing, Amantha, where you say I felt like a hypocrite, because part of me wonders for you, was that also what caused you to keep pushing through? Because you're like, I know better. I should know better. I'm the person that talks about productivity and efficiency and you've written a time-wise and health habit. And did that stop you from being able to open up about it? I'm just curious.
I think in terms of opening up with my team about it, because really like things were gravy in my personal life. It was all very contained to work, which for some people's experience of burnout is very normal. Others, it's in all the domains of life. Mine was very much driven by what was going on in the work environment. And it wasn't, I mean, I never like feeling like a hypocrite, but the reason why I just kept pushing forward is because I didn't think I had a choice. Like Inventium as a business, we've been around for 19 years, and for every one of the years leading up to year 17, which was the year when all this happened, like we'd been profitable. We'd never had a financial year where we had made a loss or where we've been running at a loss. And in this particular financial year, we were running at quite a significant loss where I was having to go into my savings account to pay people's salaries every second Thursday. And that was not an experience I was used to doing. And I know that makes me very fortunate as a business owner because I know that cash flow is like, you know, a really big issue for most business owners. But because of the financial position of the company, I'm like, I don't have a choice. I really need a break right now, but it is not an option because I've got salaries to pay. Yes, I could retrench people because we didn't have the sales and the income to support the team size that we had and the different roles that we had. But look, in that first part of the year, I remember I had so many sleepless nights where I'd just be like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I just have to work harder. I just have to get more sales. I can't let people go. Like a lot of the team I'd worked with for many, many years. And you know, and I think this was part of the exhaustion because I couldn't see clearly. Like if I hadn't been so exhausted, I would have made some really big decisions earlier on in that year that would have just circumvented a lot of the pain that I was living with in 2024 around the health of the business.
And so it just prompted me when you describe that of I didn't have a choice and feeling like I didn't have a choice. One of the things you talk about is the push through paradox. Can you talk to me about that? Because I think a lot of people listening will really, I mean, that part for me hit really hard. Like I was like, oh, like, so I'd just love you to unpack what you mean by that.
Yeah, so the push through paradox is where we, you know, initially we can see a lot of work ahead of us and we're working really hard and we've got the energy and we're kicking goals and we're like, I just did a 60-hour week and I achieved so much and I can totally do this. And it kind of becomes quite addictive. So we keep doing more. But then we get diminishing returns because you just cannot sustain that kind of output at work. And I'd keep working really hard because I was getting those addictive highs. But then the more I did that, the less productive I was during the 60 or 70 hours that I was working every week, which then means I have to work even harder to get the same kind of output. And then eventually your mind and your brain, your body, your emotions, everything just like goes on strike and they're like, okay, we're done. Like we just can't push through anymore. And that is how I got to burnout.
So talk to me because there is so much gold in this book and I would say anyone who wants to be a high performer in the long run needs to read this book because this is about how you sustain your energy in the long run for, I think, optimal performance. Talk to us about where this came from because I imagine you hit burnout. You had a really, really tough year by all accounts. Then is this where the idea sparked from? Like, tell us about where the energy game originated from.
I mean, I think with all the books that I write, they're trying to solve a problem for me. And this one, because I think like everything I was reading about how could I get out of this energy hole that I was in, it required so much energy to actually do. Like I'm not going to meditate for an hour every night. I'm not going to get up an hour earlier to, exercise and get all the endorphins flowing. I like all the things that you kind of go, well, you should do that. They just felt really unachievable. And also there were really big decisions that I needed to make with the business. And I just didn't have the energy to make those big decisions. And so I thought, okay, I need to start small. And the energy game is written for someone that is just, they're tired of being tired, or at worst, they're close to burnout or they've burnt out and they're like just completely and utterly exhausted. And when you're in that state, like you don't want to be told, well, all you need to do is just need to sleep 8 hours and you just need to eat better and cut out all highly processed foods.
Actually, can you just do sugar-free from now on? It's like, actually, the only thing that's making me function is the ridiculous amount of chocolate that I'm eating. And you can just stop talking right now. Like, that's these people, they have these like really grandiose ideas.
Yeah. It's just like, okay, so just stop drinking your coffee and cut out the chocolate and don't drink wine at night to wind down. It's like no one's going to do that. Like when you're in the depths of exhaustion, that advice just doesn't cut it. So what I wanted to find in the energy game, and when I was doing, me search, as writers tend to call it,
so good.
I'm like, what I need to find, because like as I was saying to you before when we were catching up, I think the idea of having a book that has science-backed strategies has been democratized thanks to AI, thanks to the many search engines that, are filled with all the academic journals. Like anyone can do that. But what took so much time when I was reading through, I calculated over 1,000 journal articles for the energy game, and there is quite a long reference list in the book. And I wanted to find what I think of as the minimum viable dose, or MVD. So what is the absolute minimum of this thing that will get me more energy, this intervention that will energize me or help me truly recharge or get better at setting boundaries so that my energy doesn't just leak out of me, that will have an immediate effect. And so most of I think it's 53 challenges or strategies in the book take less than about 5 minutes to do. And the impact is there because science, everything is science-backed in the book. So yeah, I'm all about like, how do I make this easy for me, and how do I make it easy for readers that are reading the energy game?
Do you want to grow in your career? Are you after a fresh start or some inspiration? Or perhaps you're in a career crisis? The book Sort Your Career Out and Make More Money by Shelley Johnson and Glenn James is such a great resource at any stage in your career. It will give you practical strategies for things like getting a promotion, making more money, moving into a leadership role, taking career risks, or if it's time to quit your job, and so much more. You can find Sort Your Career Out and Make More Money wherever good books are sold, or via the link in the podcast show notes. It's also available as an audiobook.
One thing that I really loved, there's so many things that I loved about the book, and anyone who can see the book on the table, it's like it looks really grubby because I've like what do you call it? Like I've like folded all the pages that I like, and like it's super, super practical. But that minimum viable dose concept, having gone through like a pretty significant burnout myself in 2018, I had to have 3 months off work, and I remember like I could not get out of bed. I was like, I ended up like the fatigue symptoms were so strong. I described it to people as having the flu every day. It was like, when you feel it in your limbs, in your body, and you're like, I can't get up. And so when people sprout off these ideas of like cold plunge every day at 5 a.m. I'm like, well, you can shut up right now, because that's not happening. Like when you're exhausted or fatigued, or you're going through burnout, or you're close to burnout, there's no way you can do that stuff. And one of the things that I think is really, really helpful in your book is every strategy is small and practical and has an initial, like an instant uplift. Like I found like testing, and we'll go into in the next conversation we have, what those practical strategies are, because people are really going to benefit from those. I think that when it comes to your energy levels and wanting, we often gravitate towards the transformation over the quick wins or the little tiny changes. Why do you think that is? Because you know how we're looking for, I've got to transform my whole life, when really it's the small little steps that stack up. Has that been your experience?
100%. And ultimately that's all that feels achievable, because when you are so exhausted, you literally can't overhaul your life. And maybe you might try to on Monday, but then you're probably failing by Tuesday or Wednesday and feeling really bad about yourself. And no one wants that.
No one wants that. And I want to know, okay, so there's this part of the book that I really love. And you talk about this idea of why we're so tired. And I do think it's important. You describe this idea of the energy crisis that we're living in. And I want you to unpack this, because one thing I've noticed lately, Amantha, when I'm talking to people, so if we were to rewind 5 years ago and I was talking to people, they'd be like, if I say, oh, hey, how are you? They'll be like, I'm busy. I reckon it's changed in the last few years. I'm hearing people say, hey, how are you? And they're like, I'm tired. Like I'm cooked. I keep hearing, oh, I'm just cooked. And it's got me thinking, have we moved from, hey, the default response is I'm busy to the default response is I'm tired? And I want to ask, why are we so tired?
There's so many reasons. I think like you can't have a conversation about energy and even just mental health without thinking about, well, there was 2 years of pandemic, and it's not like after 2020 and 2021 we all just like took a year off in Bali and just relaxed and pondered our lives. It's like, no, we're just ordered to go back to the office, and it was just go, go, go. And you know, when I look at the stats, a lot of us never really recovered from that. You know, you look at our relationship with devices, which is only getting worse in terms of all the things that are trying to grab our attention. And most of us are addicted. Most of us spend pretty much 0 minutes away from our phone in terms of thinking about how many minutes per day is your phone more than arm's length away from you. For most people, that's probably less than 5 minutes.
Wow.
I think like I didn't write too much about it in the book, but I think it's a really, really big thing, the impact that AI is having, because if you work, AI is changing your workplace. It is possibly making you feel really insecure about your role, but at very least there is a huge amount of change that you're dealing with at work, and that kind of change, and more importantly, that uncertainty is exhausting. And then like, let's not forget the impact of actually using AI. So those of us that have gone, you know, really deep, and we've got AI, you know, we've got agents running, and it's just part of our different workflows. We are now probably monitoring several different agents. We're constantly context switching, and we're getting brain fry, which is hugely mentally exhausting.
So when then we think about, all right, there's a lot of things competing for our attention. We are like, our devices are always demanding that focus. I want to know, before we get to like, okay, well, what do you do about it? Because I think it is helpful for us to understand the problem before we jump into the solution. And one of the other parts that I found, it was like, you know, when you read a book and you're like, oh, it's talking to me. It's me. It's like speaking into my soul. I was like, that's what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. And there's this moment in the book you talk about the 4 energy types. Can you describe what they are? And I feel like people listening, you just need to see if you can spot yourself in what Amantha's going to describe.
Okay, and we can put a link to the energy type assessment in the show notes. So if you think about 2 different dimensions, and then I'm going to talk about which of the 4 types fit in which dimension. So in terms of where our focus is, we can either be in me mode, so essentially putting your own goals first above all else, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that is a perfectly acceptable way to be in the world. Or we can be in we mode, where we're prioritizing other people's needs above our own. And, you know, with these 4 energy types, which I'll get into in a moment, it's not like a personality type where we generally go, okay, well, that's what I'm stuck with for life. These energy types are seasonal. So the best way to think about it is I'm in that particular season. Like right now, I'm a blah. So right now, you might potentially be leaning towards me mode. Maybe if you're early in your career and you've got no kids or other responsibilities, no mortgage, and so you're leaning into that. Or maybe you're an empty nester and it's all about you again. You might be in we mode. Maybe if you've got really young kids at home and, ultimately your job is to keep them alive. So you have to be in we mode. So that's one of the dimensions, if you like. The other dimension is that we can be, in terms of our motivation, we can be motivated to like avoid taking risks, avoid failure. I call that anxiety mode. And at the other end of that continuum, we can be in ambition mode. So where motivation is about really striving for more, trying to kick some goals. And then if you imagine the me mode and we mode on like an x-axis, and then the anxiety to ambition driven on a y-axis, the 4 energy types fit within combinations of those 2 continuums. And so what I know we both are, we are the type that is in me mode and that is ambition driven, and that is an achievement addict. So these are people that are just like, okay, great. Where's the next thing that I can achieve? What can I do now? How can I get further ahead in the things that I'm striving for? And often it can be really hard to know, well, where do you stop? Like, where do you draw a line? And it's like none of these types, and I'll talk about the other 3 in a moment, none of them are bad except when taken to the extreme. And you can often look to that type and go, I understand why I'm feeling like my energy is being depleted. So that's achievement addict. Then we've got the overcommitter. They are also on the ambition focus side of things, but they're in we mode. So they're all about what can I do for other people? But they are striving to help everyone, to do all the things for everyone else because they genuinely want to help. So my husband is a classic overcommitter, and when he's taking that to the extreme, I see him get utterly exhausted. Now, on the other side, on the anxiety side, and I don't mean anxiety in terms of like a clinical disorder or a diagnosis. It's more, we're really we're trying to just minimize failure, avoid risk, just kind of be a bit conservative about things. So we've got the perfectionist who is in me mode, so still, more about their own goals rather than other people's goals, but they're anxiety driven. And so they are double, triple checking things because they don't want to stuff anything up. They don't want to look bad. They don't want to get fired by a client. And when you take perfectionism to the extreme, it is absolutely exhausting. Then the 4th type are people pleasers who are in we mode, but they're anxiety driven. So they are trying to do all the things for everyone else, but it comes from a place of anxiety and trying to be liked and avoid conflict and not do the wrong thing, as opposed to the overcommitter who's striving and just wants to do all the things for everyone. And so, if you take people pleaser to the extreme, you end up utterly exhausted. And so it's really worth thinking about, and I talk about this throughout the energy game, thinking about which one do you fall into. And there's an assessment in the book, and as I said, I'll put a link to the assessment in the show notes so you can figure it out, although maybe you've already self-identified just through the description, which a lot of people do, but it will give you clues to think about. Taken to the extreme, there's clues there in terms of why is my energy non-existent.
I love it so much. I love it so much because I think when you kind of look at it, you're like the achievement addict, or heaps of people listening who are like, I am an overcommitter. And they're like, Neo, your amazing husband who wants to support everyone doing their thing, but then doesn't maybe have those boundaries to go, actually, what is achievable and what's not. Once you know where you're at, and I actually think it's a great call out around it can be seasonal. So I think about where you were, just like knocking over the table here, where you were in the business life cycle of sales aren't where they were. I need to drive this thing forward. I've got to be ambitious, ambition focused and driven. Once you know your type, what do you do with that?
So what you do is you can understand, okay, what am I missing? What do I need to address so that because all of the 4 types are fine, but just not taken to the extreme. So like, for example, if you are someone that is an overcommitter or also a people pleaser, you're probably saying yes a lot of the time. And it's either driven by the need to genuinely want to say yes and help as many people as possible, or you're saying yes out of fear. And neither of those are particularly great when we're trying to look after our energy. And so, as an example in the book, and we'll get into the 3 types of strategies in the book, the protect strategies are going to be super helpful, because that is all about protecting your energy and really thinking differently at what is the cost of saying yes, because particularly for those 2 types, those yeses are costing a lot.
And I think that is really helpful to then link to, based on my type, what are the strategies that are going to be best for me? Like, what are the ones that I need to use? And I can't wait to get into all of those practical ways people can do that. Now, this may seem like a really funny final question for you, but it was really the other night we were in Melbourne at this beautiful Japanese restaurant, and we were getting dinner, and you were like to me, oh yeah, I was doing a keynote at this energy conference, and my mind went straight to like Zen energy. Like I'm like, oh, so like a yogi conference, and maybe there was a bit of Reiki, or like, I don't know. I was just imagining you like fully, and you're like, no, like energy.
Energy networks.
And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, say more. And you're like, electrical energy and like solar energy and things.
Yeah, like how these lights are on and stuff.
Yeah,
important stuff like that.
Like, oh, okay, but so no Zen. You weren't like, no.
No.
And it did get me thinking, it's sometimes helpful to ask the silly question, because it wasn't until I asked the question that I realized we were on totally different wavelengths. And I want to know, when you think about energy and what the heck even is energy, you talk about energy accounts. Can you just explain, anyone listening who's like, when you're saying energy, what do you mean?
Well, you talked about before, when you ask someone, how are you going? They used to say, oh, I'm busy, I'm crazy busy. And now they just go, oh, I'm exhausted, I'm so tired. And through my research, I found that that's actually quite an unhelpful way to think about energy, as just this one abstract concept. Because when I got deeper into the research, what became very clear is that we don't just have the one energy account, like we're tired or not tired. We've actually got 3 different energy accounts. So we've got our physical energy account. How are we feeling in our body? Like, have we got the energy to go out for a run at lunchtime, for example? We've secondly got our mental energy account. So how sharp are we feeling, or are we just feeling like our brain is super foggy? And then we've got our 3rd energy account, which is our emotional energy account. So are we, like I was, crying at the drop of a hat, or are we feeling super resilient and just bouncing back from setbacks? So what you might find, and as part of the energy game process, I actually recruited 1,300 people who took part in a series of energy experiments. And one of the things that I asked them to do was to think about the energy not as this one big concept, but as 3 different accounts. And even just through doing that, through tracking how are they going in those 3 different accounts, and there's an energy logbook in the energy game to do that, it start to bring so much more awareness. And they could go, well, actually my physical energy is okay, but I think my mental energy is really shot, and it can make it less overwhelming. And you just go, oh, okay, so it's just really one of my energy accounts is overdrawn, but the other 2 are okay. So I have found, and through the research that I did for the book, it's a much more helpful way to think about what can feel like a really big concept, energy.
Well, also, I find it hard. You can't change anything when you're dealing with the vague. Like if I'm like, I'm tired, well, what's causing the tiredness? When I say I'm tired, what part of me is tired? Is it that, like when I describe the flu-like symptoms, like when my physical body was like just not wanting to like move properly. It's like the physicality of my energy levels was really low at that point. So if you can't identify what account is running low, and therefore where what strategies would align to help me rebuild, it then just becomes this really overwhelming problem that we in and of itself don't have the energy to solve. Like it's just such a like vicious cycle.
It is. It really is. And so, I mean, I think clarity is always the first step to problem solving.
And I mean, that's what I think there's so much gold here in the book that people need to get into. I want to close out this conversation with, I guess, letting people know where we're going to next, because this is part 1 of 2 conversations that are really important. The part 1, we really wanted to get into what is the problem right now? What's this energy crisis? What does it mean? How can we understand our own energy levels? And what the heck even is energy? Not the Zen energy that I thought you were at that conference you were talking at. And so what I want to do is just to close out, when we think about the energy game, you talk about energy challenges and recruiting all these people to do all these energy challenges. What were you doing? And what are the categories? Like anyone who's listening that's like, what were these 1,300 people actually doing? And there are 3 categories that you look at. So can you talk to us about that?
Yes. So these 1,300 people were running experiments every single week for 6 weeks. There was a lot of survey data that I collected, which thank you to those wonderful participants if they are listening. And there were 3 types of strategies or challenges that I had them do in terms of these experiments that they were running, and they got choice, and that's part of the energy game. That, you know, I'm not going to go do this thing today. Instead, you can either randomize the choice by flicking to a different page in the book, or, you know, as you play the game longer, you'll start to know, okay, I think I need this category of challenges. So the 3 types of challenges in the book are firstly boost strategies. So this is when you are running low on energy and you need an instant hit, and you've already had 3 cups of coffee and you can't go for your 4th. So this is things that instantly boost your energy. The second type of strategy are rest strategies. And I think we'll talk about this in part 2, but a lot of us are just doing fake rest as opposed to real rest, actually things that are scientifically shown to genuinely recharge us, but do it really quickly, like in less than 10 minutes. And then the third strategy are protect strategies, which I think most people don't think about with their energy. They're just like, how can I just get a quick hit of energy? Or maybe I just need to like chill for a little bit. But protect strategies are the third category. And they're really important because, you know, I when I think about protect strategies, I don't know if you watch Survivor.
I got into Survivor in a big way.
Okay. Well, I'm always into Survivor. I think I've watched all 50 seasons.
Oh my gosh.
US Survivor.
Oh goodness. Okay. Yeah, not that into it.
Okay. I'm hardcore. And there's a challenge in Survivor that's often one of the first challenges where the teams they'll be given a bucket that's got holes in it, and they've got a job to run to the beach and fill it up with water and then run back to a container that's like a couple of 100 meters away, but like the bucket's leaking because it's got all these holes in it and they have to fill up this bucket with water or this container with water. And I think about protect strategies like plugging those holes in that bucket that it's not leaking water, it is leaking energy. And so the protect strategies talk about how do you actually protect your energy so that you can keep it and not just let it leak out of you.
I love that analogy. Actually, I think as well, and we'll get into this in the next conversation, but linking it back to the 4 energy types, you talk about the achievement addict going straight for the boost strategies because they're trying to get more done. And I was like, read that and I was like, oh no, that's me. Like as soon as I saw it, I'm like, no time for rest. Yeah. I don't want any of those ones. I just want the boost so I can get more stuff done. And then I read and I thought, oh, she's speaking to me again.
Yeah.
So in the next episode, we're going to get into how you can actually use some of these challenges that have been tested by 1,300 people and that are absolutely amazing. I've already done quite a few of them and really enjoyed them. So we'll get into that on the next episode. Amantha, thank you so much for hanging out and having this conversation. The energy game. Make sure you get yourself a copy. Get it. Is it on Audible?
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It is in hard copy book form. It is in audio form, and it's on ebook or Kindle.
And I think you're going to want all of them. You're definitely going to want the hard copy, and you're definitely going to want the audio book as well. So just grab the lot is what I say. And I have enjoyed it so much, and I know you will too. Get on it. The Energy Game by Dr Amantha Imber. Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks, Shelley.
If you have enjoyed the show today, forward it to a friend, colleague, or family member who you may think it would benefit. Shelley's business Bold Side provides leadership training for a variety of different businesses. To learn more, visit boldside.com.au. If you would like to book Shelley to speak at one of your events, please reach out to the team via moneypodcast.com.au.